So creating a healing habitat at UCSF, designing for the hospital of the future. Our speakers include Stuart Eckblad. Stuart is a career promoting and creating project teams, has inspired him to innovate with integrated and collaborative processes, both to design and build healthcare facilities. Stuart introduced and launched the first integrated form of agreement at UC and UCSF Health. Nowadays, he leads this IPD project, which is the UCSF's new nearly to $4 billion Parnassus Heights hospital program. Our second speaker is Karen O'Neill. Karen is the IT Strategic Program Director for UCSF Health, and she oversees the technology programs for UCSF Health expansion initiatives, including the new Parnassus Heights Hospital. She's leading a team working to identify the hospital of the future stakeholders' journey and the underlying technologies and capabilities required to bring those experiences to life for patients, families, care providers, and the staff in the hospital of the future. Karen, you're right there. Yeah. And then from Herzog the Meuron, we have two speakers. Carly Gertler. Carly relocated from Basel, Switzerland to San Francisco in 2021 to help launch the San Francisco office. And Carly is a core team member of the UCSF New Parnassus Heights project. Carly has been highly involved in the development and utilization of augmented reality and virtual reality technologies, ranging from community engagement exhibitions to end users mock-up development. And then we have Ben Muller. He's the leader of digital practices in the US for Herzog the Meuron, and a member of the firm's IT executive board. In his role, he oversees the implementation and usage of technology tools and workflows for many projects and is instrumental in the creation of the firm's digital practice strategy. Thank you.
So I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about that big project on the Hill, the new hospital at Parnassus Heights, and share with you really some of the thinking that we're trying to accomplish and some of the vision that we're trying to accomplish. So let's start with, many of you have probably, maybe all of you have seen that image at this point. So, and certainly we're lucky we have Herzog here today, so they can even talk more about the actual design of the project with HDR. But what I want to talk about is, so what's really behind this project? What are we trying to do? It's not just that we need more patients, more beds, but really what difference are we trying to make? And so when you start, and I guess I should also start, there's several people here that are on the project, so if I say something that's not correct, keep it to yourself. So with that, so if you look at it, it's kind of hard to, I don't have a pointer, I apologize for that, but you can see how the building is partitioned, with the lowest level, of course, being the entry. The next big band is really the diagnostic and treatment, but that area where you see the vegetation, the landscape, it's a really important area. It's really high up elevation-wise. But from there, you really can see two things. One is an integration with the whole Mount Sutro. Second is it has all the views of the entire Bay Area. So it's really an incredible opportunity for light and for air, and for participation with the city and participation with the Bay. So it's really important. The upper floors then above that are the patient floors of both of acute and intensive care. So, but what's our inspiration? It's the healing habitat, which in some ways, some people have teased me about, well, that's just a different word for a hospital, but it's not. We don't look at it that way. We really see it as, when you think about what's the definition of habitat, and you think about it more in a natural way, or in nature's way of basically it's a home for a natural environment. So that's how we think about it in terms of it's a place. It's a place really for wellness. It's a place for healing. It's a place for the community to participate. It's a place for the city to participate. And also, for those of you that know us at UCSF, so we have, of course, a great academic program, and we also have a great research program. So with putting into this building and the whole concept of healing habitat, we're now able to combine our learning and our research and our treatment and our caring in one campus. So let's talk a little bit about, so when we talk about this healing habitat, and we start thinking about it's within the walls, but it's beyond the walls. So what are some of those pillars, if you want to use that word? So one is human connection. And so how do we get a real sense of welcome? And how do we get private spaces and calming and communal spaces? Because a large part of health there is really that. It's not just being in your patient room, but really how do you participate with the whole medical program and with all the staff? And so how do you start to create that human connection? So another is in terms of the act of healing. And when you think about the active in this way, there's lots of ways to think about that, but it's the journey. So the day you get your diagnosis to the day you come home and start the recovery, what is that journey? And that's part of the healing habitat. So it's much more so than even, we're going way beyond the building when we talk about that. So the organic design, and I've already said some things in terms of, we are very fortunate in some ways that we have Mount Sutra right behind us. So we have a strong connection to nature, but we have a strong connection to light. So what that gives us is really a very uplifting setting for health. So, sorry. You'll hear a lot more, certainly, than I'm going to cover about technology, because that is part of our panel here today, to really say how we're using technology to really be part of the healing habitat. And then finally, mood. And so you'll see some, apologies, you'll see some images that we want to reflect about some of the mood. And so I'm just going to, I don't know if you can read those or not, but what are they? So these are what we call design must-haves. And the idea is to give some image of what we're trying to accomplish beyond just another design. But really, so for example, omnipresent nature is really critical to us in this whole concept. It's how do people, how do patients, how do family, how do staff, also in that hard work they do because our mission is caring and teaching and discovery. It's a 24/7 job. How do we get people how do we create a space where there's nature's an opportunity for relief? So decentralized amenities, a lot of hospitals are really designed to be, exactly here's what happens in this spot, here's what happens in that spot. We're trying to actually just decentralize those things, so there's really more, less of a structured building in that sense. Community interaction is very important to us. What we really want is a place where the community can also engage in the building and come to, for example, we have an all-day eatery, which is more than just a cafeteria by any means. But in fact, it's really an opportunity for people to come from the neighborhood, from the city, to want to be there. And then finally, an intuitive design in terms of how, for example, if we use more of a residential scale, and how do we think user-friendly, how do we do that? So those are some of our design must-haves. So here's the site. I believe it's about that little green building is an existing inpatient psych, and that building will be demolished, and so that triangular shape, that's actually, that first image you saw is going to fit within that triangle. So it's a tight fit, it's a tight site. But that's, and now you can see with all the blues, you can see how now this campus gets created to allow us to actually do our program, which is our mission, again, of caring, healing, discovery, teaching. So, a couple of wows. One is the tower building that you saw is about 900,000 square feet. It's about 15 floors. And it will add 336 new beds. The count moves around a little bit here and there. And that'll then give us, because in that picture you saw, I should have probably pointed it out, is our existing building of Moffett and Long. So when we're done with the tower, we actually will have 3 buildings connected to operate as one hospital. And within that, then we'll have a total of 682 beds. So it's a significant for us in terms of our ability to provide patient care, but also it's a challenge for us because the other 2 buildings, Moffett and Lawn, are from 1950, 55 in that area. And then with the new buildings, so how do we connect that and create, again, this healing habitat across all 3 buildings with different ages and certainly different technologies? Many of you have probably heard the budget is not insignificant. So our tower and make-ready projects are about $3.8 billion. So, and our timeline is to be finished by the end of, by 2030. I shouldn't say the end of it, but 2030. And I think I said it earlier, but again, when we're done, this is very important because it will connect our whole campus and our mission. Finally, innovations. And you'll hear a lot more about the innovations with our speakers and panels here. So I'm not going to cover that other than when we talk about the IFOA, you know, it's a bunch of initials. But what's really important is this slide here in terms of these are all of our partners. This is the village it takes to do this project, and I'm sure you're not startled by that. But, you know, we're operating in a very large, big room. We've probably several hundred people working on this project. And the best part is, within the UC system, because we're public, we've had a lot of challenges with project delivery. And so this is a very exciting opportunity, not only just for a great building, but a way that we can deliver this in a way that actually can really influence how public institutions do projects in the future. So we're also very excited that this is a great opportunity for us. And also, again, another opportunity for CFI, another opportunity for P2SL to really start learning together and working together about how we can really improve the design and construction industry and our buildings. So I think with that, I'm going to basically, at this point, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Karen. And I think she's going to walk through, I'm not going to give her a presentation, but she's going to really help us to understand what's happening now with our IT initiatives. So, Karen, thank you. That's the clicker.
Good morning, and thank you, Stuart. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm here to share with you how we're creating the healing habitat at UCSF, specifically designing for the hospital of the future. As we approached our work, we looked to the vision of UCSF and the vision of the new hospital at Parnassus Heights and created what we aspire to in our IT and digital ambition. And we arrived at Complex Care Reimagined, in which UCSF becomes a global leader in delivering the most advanced, effective, and human care, which is enabled by emerging technology that not only fosters a healing habitat of wellness, but also for learning, education, and discovery and innovation, which are the essential missions of UCSF, both within our walls and beyond. The product of UCSF Health has always been focused on clinical outcomes. In approaching the new hospital experience, we thought that it would be a shift in thinking from the past. And in addition to focusing on clinical outcomes, we really need to focus on the UCSF experience, which is dedicated to complex care, again, powered by technology and human ingenuity. So as we're looking at what role the new hospital will play, experiencing being out front and center, and how we care, heal, teach, and discover. We've taken a new approach with the new hospital at Parnassus Heights, and in our designing for experiences, as Stuart mentioned. We're designing for the experiences of our patients, our families, our care providers, staff, everyone that's working within the building. And we thought it was critically important to do that as we looked at our past large construction projects, because we didn't want to risk locking in current state. So it's critically important as we consider the experiences, consider the technology implications, plan for the power, plan for the data, plan for the wall backing, plan for potential changes in space, and all the while needing to maintain flexibility for the future. We know the building opens in 2030, but as Stuart mentioned, our existing towers are from the 50s. This new tower will stand for many decades. So we're striving to understand what requirements will material change for those cross-cutting experiences from pre-arrival through check-in, through family waiting, discharge prep, all the way through discharge, with a seamless experience with the connected towers. As Stuart mentioned, this new tower will connect to 2 legacy buildings. So many of you can imagine, 10, 15, 20 years ago, what it was like to travel via an airplane. Very different from what it's like today. When you purchase your tickets online, you check in online. The check-in area is not like what it used to be. Similarly with banking. So we have that in mind as we approach for technology innovation. And there are potential implications on space. For example, if the majority of our patients are checking in, registering before arriving, perhaps that registration in admitting area doesn't need to look like what it does today in our hospital. We realize that complex care is really the center of UCSF's racket, and the new hospital is the center for our complex adult care. So this experience design work really needs to identify new ways to deliver high-quality, complex care and deliver optimal outcomes through the use of technology, through analytics, artificial intelligence, predictive analysis. And with that, we have established a team that's focusing on understanding what these cross-cutting journeys look like. So we have a cross-functional team. I'm going to talk in a minute about what some of the roles are on that team, and they're organized around these experiences and capabilities and working to influence our key stakeholders and helping us to align both our people, our processes, really to bring the experience to life. So the team, again, is focused on patients and family, operations and staff, and then, of course, we need to focus on innovation, deployment, and test. Some of these roles may be new to you. They're fairly common in industries like where you're creating a product. For example, within Apple, I'm sure there's a product manager for the iPhone. So we have a product manager and a designer. These are not typical roles that we've had at UCSF in designing new buildings, but we feel that these are really critical and essential roles. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what they do or their backgrounds. A clinical nurse informaticist, a solutions architect, and we also have a project manager on the team as well. So a product manager, some of you may be familiar with that, but that's someone who deeply understands the technology and the needs of the market, of understanding competitive analysis, defining a vision, aligning stakeholders, building business cases, understanding financial impacts, and essentially responsible for ensuring that whatever solutions we identify align with the customer and business desired outcomes. Designers, perhaps a little bit easier to resonate to, they're really just understanding, describing what the future state may look like. So they're understanding current state, challenges, opportunities, user needs, future transformed workflows and experiences. creating holistic experiences across digital and in-person, and again, ensuring sustainability for the future. Solutions architect, that's a technologist who really can understand technology options that are available to meet business needs and helping to design the integration of the technologies. We have a clinical nurse informaticist. This is someone who has deep experience as a practicing nurse, also has that deep clinical background, and also understands workflows, technology, analytics, informatics, understands how to assess data, and really helps identify what is the optimal care delivery environment. An integration engineer is someone who helps connect all the disparate systems to make sure that they're all communicating and integrated. And then, of course, a project manager is the person who's responsible for the day-to-day scope, schedule, finance, et cetera. So at a very high level, our conceptual approach, and you see the team represented there on the right, is to be visionary and future forward with parity. Again, understanding that we do have legacy towers that we do need to take into account and create as seamless of an experience as possible when the new hospital opens. We also, being here in the Bay Area, want to embrace and cultivate our status as a beacon for innovation. We hope to showcase a war of the future, a prototyping space where we can build excitement and attract tech partners in the donor community. Of course, we want to test and de-risk as much as possible so that we don't introduce problems when the new hospital opens, and we fully intend to implement any new technologies and workflows in existing spaces to minimize any challenges just acclimating to the new hospital when it opens. It's difficult and complex enough for someone to acclimate to a new building. We don't want to throw new technology on top of that. So we fully anticipate implementing new tech in approximately the 2028 timeframe, so 2 years before the new tower opens. And again, we've talked a little bit about the role-based cross-functional teams. We are aligning to UCSF's Strategic Vision 2025 culture and operating model. So Stuart mentioned a little bit about these journeys and experiences, and we've started to create very futuristic patient journeys, and I'm going to share one with you this morning, demonstrating how future technology can improve the lives of our key stakeholders. Again, the patients, the family, the clinicians, staff, researchers, and being a teaching hospital, our learners who work in the hospital every day. And why is it valuable? Well, these journeys will serve as playbooks for the technologies that will allow us to bring these experiences to life. They'll help us validate what the business wants, and will help us understand the financial impacts of those, and will be our playbook for when we are at the point of fit up and implementation. So now I invite you to imagine the following: a patient journey experience at the new hospital at Parnassus Heights in the year 2030, and I'd like to introduce you to Alejandro. Alejandro is 55 years old. He's a native Spanish speaker living in Fresno. His daughter Frida is 22. She's just recently graduated from college here in San Francisco, and his wife Elena is living with him in Fresno. And Alejandro has driven up from Fresno to help Frida move into her first apartment. Dad's on the way. So while filling up for gas, it's a long ride from Fresno, filling up for gas here in San Francisco, Alejandro has chest pain and he's short of breath. A nearby observer calls 911, and paramedics arrive at the scene. Alejandro is transported to UCSF's new hospital at Parnassus Heights, to our new emergency room. And the good news is he's diagnosed with RO rule out myocardial infarction, which means he's not having a heart attack. His workup has determined, again, that it's not an active MI or heart attack, but it has showed, the CT scan has showed arterial blockage. So Alejandro needs angioplasty tomorrow. While he's in the emergency department, his journey and times in each patient area are captured for real-time operational insights and patient flow. And that's happening via an RTLS tag, a real-time location sensor tag, that he's given when he has arrived, that tracks his journey. We can identify where Alejandro is at any moment in time. And we're gathering that data not only to understand where he is, but to understand what the patient flow looks like, how much time has he spent, and help us improve our workflow processes. And his wife, Elena, is at home in Fresno, 4 hours away. So Alejandro is wheeled from the emergency department to his inpatient room, welcomed by his preferred name and language on a digital whiteboard. Again, this is done via that RTLS sensor, helping him understanding where he is, feeding into our electronic medical record that we can identify which room he's been assigned to, and helping understand his preferences in terms of language. A big plus for any of you that have spent any time in an emergency department lately, those emergency departments are very, very busy, but our capacity management team coordinated a room very quickly so he didn't have to wait in that ED. Our ED is just busting at the seams. Once he's in his room, he's lying in a smart bed, and these new smart beds are able to assess and determine his height, his weight, even vital signs. They're taken automatically, and they're automatically uploaded into the patient record. Some of these capabilities that I'm talking about, we do not have today in our adult hospital. In fact, all of what I've just explained, we do not have those capabilities today. I should note that. So this is very futuristic thinking for us at UCSF. We also have ambient intelligence sensors that are in the room monitoring things, and biosensors that can take continuous vitals and uploading those to our electronic medical record as well. While Alejandro is in his room, he presses the bathroom request button, and it sends an alert directly to a patient care assistant on her mobile device. She's able to acknowledge a request and let Alejandro know that she'll be there very quickly. He's getting fluids, and his IV pump tubing becomes kinked, and it sends an alert automatically to his primary nurse, who's mobile, working on the floor. All the while, things are quiet in the room, helping for that healing habitat environment. No beeps and noises. That alert is sent silently, so not to disturb Alejandro. Again, his biosensor is continually monitoring his heart rate, his respiration, his temperature, and there are predictive analytics that are happening using the data and other data from early warning deterioration, all monitored via a remote nursing team. Some of you may be aware that through COVID, there's been quite a large burnout in healthcare, in nursing, and in providers. We've suffered quite a bit of that. Many, I think all healthcare systems have. So creating these virtual nursing teams can help alleviate some of that burnout for the floor nurses and really improve nurse satisfaction as well as patient satisfaction. Again, I've mentioned that the room is quiet. Again, all adding to that healing habitat environment. So as Alejandro needs to use the restroom, he's attempting to get out of bed, but because he's a high-risk patient, those ambient sensors that I mentioned earlier recognize that and trigger an alert immediately to his primary nurse, a virtual nurse, and the staff that's closest to his patient room, silently. Immediately, a virtual nurse pops up on a large display at the footwall. You see her face, you see her name, you see her role, so her credentials are identified. And she is able to communicate with Alejandro, ask him to please stay in bed, don't get up. And she's able to determine through that real-time location system that also the staff are wearing that the primary care nurse is just 2 rooms away and that she'll be there in just a moment. So reassuring Alejandro, help will be there in just a few moments. We don't want Alejandro to fall. So as the nurse enters the room, there's a sensor just outside the door, and her picture, her name, her credentials are displayed on that large display on the footwall. So Alejandro knows who's entering the room. In a teaching hospital, if any of you have spent time in a teaching hospital, you know that there are many, many people that come in and out. We have very large care teams. It's part of our teaching mission. And Alejandro talks with his nurse about his family. Elena and Frida have yet to arrive. He talks about his family, and he talks about his pets, and he misses them. He's nervous. And the nurse shows Alejandro how he can upload photos. He hadn't planned this wasn't a planned check-in. He didn't bring photos with him, but he has his mobile device. So he can upload photos to a display, and he can see that, and that, again, aids to his healing, the concept of a healing habitat, seeing pictures of his loved ones and of his dogs. She also shows Alejandro how he can control his lights, the window shades, and the room temperature from the same system, which is accessible at his bedside, a tablet display. So the floor nurse needs to move on. She has other work to do, and she gives a warm handoff to the virtual nurse who can complete the admission paperwork. That can be done via someone remotely, and again, allow that primary floor nurse to go and provide other direct patient care where she is needed most. So Alejandro is a little concerned about completing this admission paperwork. He's concerned that he would like to bring his wife in and also an interpreter. So the virtual nurse contacts his wife, Elena, to find a time that works for the 3 of them so that they can conduct the admission paperwork. Alejandro's waiting for that, and he's in his room, and he forgets how to adjust the lighting. So he uses voice activation, hey Siri, to activate a nurse call capability to get help so he can be reminded how to adjust the lighting. And the virtual nurse pops up, and she's able to assist Alejandro. She's also able to confirm and review the time of the admission call that's been determined with his wife Elena and the schedule of his care plan. So the virtual nurse completes the admission process via video with Elena and Spanish interpreter on the video call, all seamlessly tying in multiple parties. It's time for our surgeon to arrive to explain the procedure to Alejandro. And as he enters the room, again, his credentials are also displayed. He has a team of folks with him, and their credentials and their photos are all displayed as well. But I should have mentioned, before he walks in, this is something we don't have today, but we're planning for. There's a digital display outside of the patient room. So typically, there can be papers that are pasted to the patient door, indicating precautions and other type of relevant information about the patient in that room. But we are planning for a digital display that can have up-to-date, real-time, current information on any patient precautions, course, has the patient's names and other pertinent clinical information that our surgeon, as he's coming in, is able to review. He's also gelling in, performing his hand hygiene entry, which is required as he's entering the room. And hand hygiene compliance is one of the most critical patient safety measures in healthcare. So the lack of reliable data can severely handicap a hospital's ability to improve accountability and stop the spread of infections. So being able to leverage sensors to track and monitor that hand hygiene compliance is really important and will help us minimize, again, the spread of infections. So he arrives, he introduces himself to Luis, and Elena has arrived. They pull in the nurse, and they're able to pull up images in the room on that footwall, that big display, and walk through what they've seen and what the issues are to try and explain the procedure to Alejandro. All the while, there are sensors in the room that are capturing the pertinent conversation between the care team and Alejandro, questions, patient responses, so that once the care team leaves, they can leverage that information to accurately convey and document the conversation in the patient's healthcare record. Again, he's able to review those notes. Also, and I know that Carly and Ben are going to talk about virtual reality, and another component that we're planning for our new hospital is also to use virtual reality for things like patient education. So as Alejandro has this angioplasty scheduled for the next day, he may not understand exactly what that means and how that's going to happen. And through the use of virtual reality, we can help him understand what that procedure will look like. So as those catheters are going in through his groin up to his heart, to help him understand what the procedure will look like. So now the surgeon has left, Luis is hungry, and he's able to use that same tablet at his bedside to on-demand order food from our 24-hour eatery that Stuart mentioned earlier. And he's able to see his diet order in meal options. So many patients have limitations and restrictions. So that's coming directly through our electronic medical record. Any type of dietary calculations are calculated. He orders his food. He's able to see that it will arrive within 30 minutes. The meal is being delivered via an autonomous transport system. A robot is coming from that eatery to his patient room. So Alejandro is now ready for bed. Elena and Frida have left. He's nervous about the procedure tomorrow. So he wants to do a quick video chat with his family. He looks, and he's able to do that very easily using that tablet bedside device and see them on his large footwall display. Once that call is concluded, he's able to rest. He's able to play his favorite music. He's able to adjust the lights. He's able to look at photos of his family and of his dogs. And if he wants, he can leverage, again, a virtual reality capability to help him meditate before going to sleep. The lights in the room dim to a nighttime setting, adhering to natural circadian rhythm to enhance his sleep, all contributing toward the healing habitat. So the next morning, Alejandro wakes up, and his care plan shows that his procedure is to start at 7 a.m., and that he is NPO, meaning he can't eat or drink. He can see from that electronic whiteboard, again, directly viewable from his bed, that his transport team will arrive in 20 minutes and take him to the cath lab, which is where his angioplasty will be performed. So we have that integration to that electronic whiteboard with our electronic medical record where he's able to see that. Good news, procedure was a success, and he is recovering well. All the while, Frida and Elena didn't have to sit in a surgical waiting area. They were able to go to that 24-hour eatery. They were able to go out into those areas of the healing habitat, out relax with the open-air gardens outside of that area, relax with nature, and they're getting real-time progress updates throughout the procedure, which is significantly reducing their anxiety. And they're prompted when the cardiologist is ready to give them a post-procedure update. So they're both ready and available to meet with them, and they both feel incredibly relieved to be informed. So getting ready for a discharge, and Alejandro is able to see the education that has been assigned to him as part of his discharge plan. He's able to complete that education. Virtual nurse is assisting him with any discharge teaching, things that he needs to do to care for himself. And they, of course, are leveraging a virtual interpreter to help with that, to answer any questions that he or Elena may have. And they're also able to pull in a pharmacist virtually for any medical education regarding his medications. And he can see that most of his discharge milestones are complete, and he's just waiting for the doctor's discharge order, so it's not that what's happening, he's able to see that. And the nurse sends a message to a robot. You see that photo there on the lower left. That's a technology, a robot known as Moxie. We don't have these today, but we find them to be very interesting. So we send Moxie out to pick up Alejandro's prescriptions that he needs to bring home with him. And the discharge order is entered, and the primary nurse communicates that Luis is ready for discharge. Elena and Frida are aware of this. He can see his ride is coming at 11, and that the transport team to escort him out to that is going to arrive at 10:40 a.m. Here, what I'm showing is just some of our assumptions around operational expectations, things like remote virtual interpreters, remote virtual patient monitoring, virtual care through nursing. And then on the right, technology. We've talked about real-time location systems, the electronic medical record, smart beds, all of these things that I touched on. So we look at that intersection, and that's where we see the future for our patient experience at our new hospital at Parnassus Heights. Thank you.
All right. So we're here to talk about what technology we as architects use to design and what is in our digital toolbox. So how do we get from a sketch of an idea through design and documentation through to construction, and what technology we use in that process? We put those into sort of 4 main categories of project delivery, computational design, visual art, and our workshop. Under project delivery, that is that focuses on how we coordinate and document a building, so that would mostly be in BIM and CAD. Computation, that solves for complex geometries and parametrically driven design constraints, also includes building analysis and simulation. And visual art is how we communicate that project to a client and other stakeholders, usually through renderings or animation, and now through more interactive means like virtual reality. Our workshop, that's where we do model making or full-scale mock-ups. That could either be analog or digital, so CNC fabrication or digital fabrication. Now, there's still a lot of technologies and workflows that span these categories, so they're not hard lines in between all these. So coding and scripting, building analytics, they go into all these different categories. And the one we're focused on today is going to be extended reality, which is really touches a bit each of them. I have this. So extended reality, or XR, is an umbrella term for all these other realities like virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. So virtual reality is if you're standing in a room and you put on the headset, which we have and you'll be able to try out, you no longer see that room and you're fully immersed into a new virtual world. For AR, that's augmented reality, then you still get to see that room, but then there's a layer of digital content on top of that that then augments your view of this world. And then mixed reality is similar to augmented reality, except it mixes the digital and physical together, so the digital is aware of the physical environment. So imagine that you're in a room and you take a digital ball and you throw it into the room, it will bounce off the floors and the walls. The digital content is aware of the physical, so that's mixed reality. So virtual reality really comes in sort of two flavors when you're looking at it through the device. We use 360-degree renderings, which you see there on the left, and full immersive walkthroughs, which is on the right. And the main difference between these is the degrees of freedom in which you have to move around. So in the 360-degree images, that you only have 3 degrees of freedom. So if you think of an X, Y, and Z axis, you can only rotate around those axes. You can't move around. With the full walkthrough and the full 6 degrees of freedom, then it's just how you live in life. You can translate along all those axes and rotate along those, so you get 6 degrees of freedom. For augmented reality in our design process, we use that as in addition to our physical models, we also do digital models. So you can see there on the left that is in a model scale, that we have this, and our colleagues are all looking at it through the HoloLens. They can all see the same digital content sitting there on the table, and they can talk about it. And so we use this as client presentations. What's quite nice about that is you can take that same model at model scale and then make it full one-to-one scale. It's the same model, and you can experience it as a full digital mock-up. And both AR and VR are what we sort of moved on and are continue to innovate and implement on the UCSF project.
So we're going to take a moment, there we go, we're going to take a moment to talk about the concept, coming back and kind of giving a little bit more detail to what Stuart presented. So this is the new hospital site, NHPH, New Hospital Parnassus Heights. It's at the end of the Parnassus campus on the east side. It's really at this intersection between a very low-scale residential neighborhood of Cole Valley, a very dense kind of urban campus, and then it's situated north-south in between the Monsutro Space Preserve, which is to the south, and then Golden Gate Park to the north. And then we also have this core idea of the healing habitat, which Stuart did present before, so we won't go too in detail to this, but it's an extremely pivotal concept for us and how we imagine the creation and the experience of this hospital environment. So we begin with these two kind of key tenets. We have this beautiful site that's situated between 2 large green areas. It's also at an intersection between an urban scale and a residential scale. And then we also have the healing habitat, so focusing on how we reduce the scale of the building, how we create a more human experience, how we integrate landscape, how we, the kind of pillars that Stuart presented before. While also knowing that this is a world-class academic medical center of 900,000 square feet, needing to fit there on the site. So we reach the 294 maximum height, break it down into 15 floors. The schematic of the building is basically by its program. So we have the lobby and treatment at the lower levels. The middle of the building is inset to create what we call the Sutro Terrace. That's that large green space that you saw the image of earlier. And this is really a core concept of the project, is to have that omnipresent nature to provide opportunities to be outside for patients, staff, family members, and community members. And above that, we have the patient rooms. And the patient rooms are leaned back on both sides to decrease the impact of the building on its surroundings, to minimize the perceived scale of the building. And here's that elevation image from Hillway looking south. So you have a distinct form, it's shaped by its surroundings. It's an edge to the campus, which is a kind of gateway for the campus starting in 2030. We explained this before, but there's not only the Sutro Terrace on the level 6, there's also courtyards in the center of the building and a really lush pedestrian greenscape experience that separates the arrival in your car and then the kind of entry into the hospital. So it tries to minimize, again, the kind of impact of the intensity of your arrival experience as you move into the hospital. So when we look at the project design timelines, this is really simplified. All of you are in Lean. You all know how complex an IFOA project can be. That's an OSHPOD project. We're looking at increment 5, so just the flow of concept to criteria to detailed design and forward. What's interesting with this project is, and on hospital projects, you're constantly mediating between a very, very, very detailed decision about a patient room at the same time that you're just deciding about the overall massing of the building. We're working on validating performance criteria, working with cost modeling, de-ROFIS data, while also needing to do big picture community engagement. We've got a lot of stakeholders in this community at Parnassus. And then we're also simultaneously working at the experiential level now with detailed design using these AR/VR tools, while also needing to engage with clinical users, deciding medical equipment decisions, et cetera. So our technology is what allows us to mediate between these different scales and these different stakeholders. And what we're going to focus on today are 2 case studies that use AR and VR to do that. A quick note that we don't only work digitally, we also start in an analog manner. The broad paintbrush stroke at the beginning is extremely important for us. So as we begin in concept design here, we're looking at the overall massing of the building. These are concept design models from that time period. And at that same time, our architect of record HDR partners were working with the users to get critical feedback about which patient room we'd move forward with. So they were able to build 3 different mock-ups of those patient rooms and get the critical feedback needed to make a decision for which type midboard, outboard, or inboard room we would go with. This was during COVID, so those patient room mock-ups were then scanned and put onto Matterport, and those who weren't able to attend in person because of COVID restrictions were able to zoom around on their computers and still give us the feedback we needed. So that patient room decision is an extremely important one when we're designing a hospital. It dictates the entire kind of grid of the building. And designing a functional and rational building is also, we've been explaining the kind of eloquent concept of it, but also there's the rationality of what is a hospital. It has to function impeccably. So that kind of gave us the premise for these 2 wings of our floor plan, which are then stacked 7 high. And the area of the family zone, which is towards the outside of the patient room, it's the least clinical area of the patient room, is where we can create a little bit of articulation on the exterior of the building. Each of those sawtooths represents a patient room, so we match the scale of the kind of human experience to the scale of the small-scale neighborhood next door. And that's what you see here in this image from Parnassus. So we go from 48 unit floors up to 36 unit floors at the top. That patient room was part of one of our case studies that we're about to talk about, which was our community engagement exhibition that we had at Parnassus in March of 2022. It was a month-long exhibition where we had models, images, but also developed augmented and virtual reality tools to explain our new hospital building to key community members, also to UCSF staff and doctors and people who wanted to come in and learn about the building, and also to key government officials who would come in and then be kind of important in supporting our project. And before we kind of get over to the AR/VR, what we found was actually we had around 500 visitors during this 1-month time period, and we were able to hear extremely good feedback from community members who told us that they were able to understand the building, their fears were quelled, they felt much more comfortable about the project. So this was a really key exhibition and milestone for this project.
Yeah, so the different, so we implemented both AR and VR experiences in the Parnassus experience. The AR part you could either go and experience through a tablet like an iPad, or through the HoloLens, which is a mixed reality device that we have here. And for the virtual reality piece, you could use the MetaQuest 2. So we had all these available in the space. So this shows the site model that we had that was in there. So we had a physical site model as we normally would do, which has a limited piece of the context. So then we used AR to then expand that context to show the context all the way from Sutro Tower to the Golden Gate Bridge. So the community members, people who lived in the neighborhood, could go in and experience it and try to get down and see from their house or from a park what does the project look like from that perspective. And it was a quite interactive piece of it. The other part that we had for AR was 2 different models, which you'll see. One of them is the full building model. That's the one closest to us. That one shows the relationship between the new hospital and Moffitt and Long, the existing ones. And then the other model is a section model. It's a bit more diagrammatic, shows the colors, shows where the different programs of the space are going to be. And what we found with this was, again, it's much more interactive. Instead of having these static images or curated animation, the people that came to experience Parnassus could then go and choose where they wanted to see and what was important to them, what perspective did they want to see. And because they're digital models, you can sort of physically go into them and look through on a particular floor. And we have all this so you can come and see it over the coffee break or the lunch break. This is the VR experience, and you can scan this QR code with your phone and you'll get the same thing on your phone. This is a 360-degree image, so it's only the 3 degrees of freedom, not a full walkthrough. But it shows Sutro Terrace on the 6th floor outside the all-day eatery. And while you can't walk through it, it is still quite convincing and gives you a really good sense of the space. And we don't necessarily just use AR and VR for representation purposes at the end and for presentations for the client or stakeholders, but we really use it in our design process. This is a view of the model of our BIM model. So this is our Revit model viewed through Enscape, and you can look at it through VR. So we use this in the design process. So and it's a live link to Revit. So should we want to make changes on the fly, we can do that while we're in VR. So as you're experiencing it, you can make changes as you go. And that is something that we continue with this process with our users.
So many of you, I think, here probably work in healthcare, and you know that there's a really intensive user engagement process that we go through to get the feedback that we need on these types of projects. So we're going to talk specifically about where we are today with our user meeting process. We are now in detailed design, which means that we're in the phase of building mock-ups. This is our mock-up facility that we have down in Mission Bay, where we're going to be building kind of Frankenstein versions of a few of the clinical spaces for mock-ups. Those are the dark spaces on the right side. But then we have an open space that will be where we have MedGas testing starting in 2025. But that open space we're going to be using to do AR and VR mock-ups for the larger clinical spaces. So for multiple types of ORs. And what we're showing here is about a 80-foot by 80-foot interoperative MRI suite. That's the orange. And the 4 different other orange parts to the left side are the additional AR or VR mock-ups that we'll be able to show in that space. So by choosing to do this virtually, we're able to build larger spaces, we're able to build them quicker, we're able to virtually build them quicker, we're able to save time, money, et cetera. So it's going to be a really pivotal tool for us to get the feedback we need here during detailed design. And where we see that kind of fitting in is these virtual and augmented reality mock-ups are somewhere in between what we call a white box mock-up, which just shows the walls of the space, and a finished vignette mock-up that has actual equipment pieces in it. So these virtual and augmented reality mock-ups will show both the spatial boundaries, but also will show equipment pieces, so allow our users to be able to reach up and feel what's in the space and tell us pivotal pieces of feedback about proximities in the rooms.
So this is one of our first tests. This is a sort of a quick and dirty test. This is an export directly from our Revit model of an OR suite that we invited the users to come and get a sense of the space. They use the HoloLens over here. So this is AR, and get a sense of where equipment layouts would be, and to get feedback directly from the users. It was one of the main feedback that we got was one that they wanted it to be a bit more tactile. It was nice to see it, and we can be quick with that, but they also really wanted to be able to feel things. So as we're moving forward with mock-ups, we will do sort of the white box model and then augment on top of that by adding equipment in. And you'll see that when you try on the HoloLens, if you come over, that it has a smaller field of view, so it's sort of a cropped field of view. So you can't really get a full sense of space because you can't see everything at once. It's much better if you can see an object or an element all in one of the views, which is a cropped view. So we're continuing our tests with that, and we are also implementing VR for client and user feedback, and it gives our stakeholders a much better sense of materiality and light and the space as a whole. So it just gives them a better understanding. The field of view of VR is much greater than that of the AR, even though it's not a full one. But it does give you a much better sense. It's much more immersive. So we're moving forward with that. We're also using Sketchfab, so we can upload this model to a cloud service that then you could scan a QR code, and people at home on either a tablet, a phone, or a computer would be able to go through the space from home. And if they happen to have an AR device, would get the full experience just from their home.
So we've talked a lot about the design process, but going off of what Karen presented before, these digital tools also move us into the final outcome of the project itself. So we're working with Karen's team throughout this kind of entire process to understand the flexibility that's needed in the spaces that we're creating and the different technologies that we need to plan for as we move forward. And one of the ones that we're also very interested in is, I'm sure many of you know this, but the environmental technology of colored lighting and how that's directly tied to clinical outcomes for patients and their well-being and their health. So these tools don't just end in our process, but also are pulled forward into the way that we will implement in the building. So we've spoken a little bit about just how we've engaged stakeholders with these two examples. So this IFOA type of project, especially a hospital project, especially a UCSF hospital project, means that we have lots and lots and lots of stakeholders that we're engaging in. We've got our end users, we have our entire builder and designer team, we have the UCSF as our client, we also have patients and community members, et cetera. So using this AR and VR technology is what allows us to communicate between everyone and get everyone on the same page to support the project. What we also see is interesting with augmented and virtual reality is we are working with the software developer companies and learning from them and feeding back to them for what we want to develop and push this technology forward. So that's a two-way arrow there, and that's something that we will continue to do as this project moves forward. Thanks. Good.